Welcome back to part 2 of programming AWS Lambda. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we need to install NodeJS on our local system. We're going to create our NodeJS application on our local system first and then upload that to AWS Lambda. So we just go into here, and depending on whether you've got a 64-bit or 32-bit Windows installer there, or if you're running Mac, you can install that on there as well. So just run through and install that first. Okay, so now we need to create a Node.js application, and so we're going to create that on our local service, and then we're going to zip that and then upload that to AWS Lambda. So we go into our Node.js command prompt, which would have been installed when you installed Node.js for Windows. And then just cd into a directory that you can create if you previously created for this application. Okay, so just in there now, and so what we need to do now is to install our two packages that we need for our application. So that what we need is we need async as we normally do for all these Node.js applications. And we also need to install the Graphics Magic NPM module as well to enable us to use ImageMagick. So we just click on that, and that will run through and install that for us. So once we've created the skeleton for our Node.js application, we can then look at changing the index or creating an index.js file for that application, which will contain our code that we communicate with ImageMagick. So that's just all in here now, and it's also got our AWS SDK and async in there as well, requiring GM. It's using S3, so we'll just leave that as it is now. So once we've done that and we've cut and pasted in from the lab notes, we can then zip that whole folder. So what we want to do is zip the contents of the folder, which is just this here. We don't want to zip the entire or the folder itself. So when that zip file's finished, we call it index.zip, and it will look like this when it's opened up. So it'll have our index.js, and it'll have all of our node modules, which are listed in here. And so that's what our index.zip file will look like. It won't be ImageMagick and then index.js and node modules. It'll be the contents of ImageMagick, which is in that zip file. So once we've done that, we can actually go in and upload that to our AWS Lambda console. So jumping back into our AWS Lambda console, we'll create a new Lambda function. Okay, so again, we're going to skip that and we're going to create our own one. So we're just going to call this \lambda-s3-lab and give it a similar description. So this time we're not going to be editing the code in line, we're going to be uploading our zip file. So we'll just go into there and we'll upload our zip file. Okay, so there's our index.zip that we'll upload. Okay. And so now we need to go into our Lambda function role. So we don't want a basic execution role because we're going to be accessing Amazon S3 resources. So we need to actually get in here an S3 execution role. Okay, now we can just click on allow. Okay, so that's done. So back into our Lambda console, and I'm just going to go into now, so we see here we've got our Lambda S3 exec role has been created and put in there. So I'm just going to leave the memory the same, 128 meg, that should be fine, I think. And then I'm going to change the timeout though to 30 seconds. It's a much more complex application, so we'll give it a little bit more time to do its stuff. So just click on next. There we have a review of everything, so that's fine. We've got our name of it, it's Node.js. the S3 execution role this time, and a timeout of 30 seconds this time as well. So create the function. Okay, so that's worked. That's done its stuff. That's fine. So now we need to go into the S3 management console, and we're just creating two buckets there. So one I've called here, you'll give yours a unique name. It won't be the same as ours. All buckets need to be unique. So mine I've got here, I've called backspace-lab.image, and then the next one is backspace-lab image resize. So yours need to have the same dash image on it and dash image resized. Without that, it won't be able to reference it properly. So it's okay to have the this bit here, but the end of it needs to be the same. And so what we're going to do is just upload some images to that, which I've already done. So a couple of images there of some astronauts, and hopefully when we run our application, it will put those resized images, it will resize them to thumbnails and put them into the backspace-lab image resized bucket. So now going back into our Lambda function, we can test it. So what we're going to do is click on test, and it's got our sample event template. We're not going to use that. So we're going to create our own one, and we'll paste from our lab notes in there. So we need to change our image. Okay, so change it to whatever the name of your images is, and you need to change your bucket name in here as well. So you put your bucket name in here. Okay, so just put in the name of our bucket in there and the ARN of our bucket. Okay, now we just click on submit. Okay, so that's finished. Took a bit of time. It was a lot longer than it would have taken we just did the Hello World application that we did first time. So it's a lot more complex an application. So nothing was returned, so we didn't have anything defined to return for a success log there. So that's fine. So let's have a look and see what's happened here. So it looks like we've so we've gone through that. Okay, so we've outputted there the bucket name and the object astronaut.jpg, and that looks like it's worked fine there. So it's taken, unlike the other one that took only about 70 milliseconds or so, this one's taken quite a bit of time. So the build duration is going to be 16 seconds actually. So it's a lot more complex, this one. So what we should do now is go into S3 and see whether it worked. So we can go into here. So we have our lab image resized. So we should have a resized image of our astronaut.jpg. So there we have resized astronaut.jpg. And the size of that is only 3.4K. And if we go back to our original one, and there we can see it was originally 1.1 meg. So it's done its job. It's successfully grabbed the image from that bucket, and it's processed it using Image Magic, and it's saved it back into the image resized bucket. So now that we've tested our Lambda function, we can now use it in combination with S3 events. So we're just going to go into here and click on our source bucket, which is backspace-lab-image, or yours will be called whatever -image. And then we're going to go into properties, and then we're going to go into events and have a look at our events. So I've already got one set up here, so I'll just get rid of that one for now. So we're going to create a new event. So okay, so here it is. So we're going to give the event a name, and then we're going to select the type of event. And so here we can see the type of event. So we can see we've got a reduced redundancy lost object. So if we're using reduced redundancy service in S3 and that object goes missing, we can create a Lambda function that can, or an event that will trigger in a Lambda function or whatever to recreate that object. We've also got a number of other ones here, so when an object is removed or when an object is created. So we're going to use object created all, okay, as our event. So whenever any object goes into this bucket, it's going to trigger that object to be processed by our Lambda function. So we're just going to prefix it with JPEG. So basically, we're only going to be processing, sorry, not prefix, we'll leave prefix as it is, it's suffix actually. So anything with the extension of .jpeg, it will process. Anything else it won't bother processing. So we're only going to be processing JPEG files. And we're going to, we can actually send our event to an SNS topic, an SQS queue. So we could actually send it to a queue which would be processed by an EC2 instance, which is the old way before Lambda came along, is the way we would normally do this. But now that Lambda's here, it's a much better way of doing things, much cleaner and simpler. So we're going to choose Lambda function, and then we're going to enter our Lambda function here. And so here is our backspace -lambda -s3 function that we want to use, not use the one that we used previously. So it's this one here, the new one. Okay, and we'll just give it a name and click on save. And there we can see we've got our S3 notification for Lambda, and the event is object created all, and we're going to filter for JPEG files only, and we're going to trigger a Lambda function, and there's our Lambda function that we're going to trigger. So now we should be able to go into S3 and upload some objects to that and see what happens. So I'm just going to go into our source image bucket, and I'm just going to change the name of one of these files, which will be the same as triggering if you put in a new file. So if you change a file, it'll do the same thing. So I'm just going to go into rename that and call that astronaut number 3, and click on the tick button. Okay, so that's done. So now we go back into our, will probably take a little bit of time for this to happen, but when we go back into our resized, okay, so that was quite quick. So we've actually now resized our astronaut 3.jpg, and it's done it automatically. So as soon as we changed the name of that file, it automatically resized it for us. And so there we can see we've got 5.6K. And the original one was 1.4 meg. So that's a great thing. So we can basically, if we've got a front-end application, we can just upload images to it, and then within a few seconds we can automatically have our images processed. So it's a great service, and certainly one to consider if you're going to be running code on the back end and you don't want to worry too much about architecture. So that's the end of this lab. I hope you've enjoyed, and I hope you get to see the benefits of AWS Lambda, because it really is a game changer for AWS, and it's a great service that they've introduced. I'll see you in the next lesson.